So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here at our third speaker in our Bacardi Eminent Scholar series entitled Exploring the Road Ahead for Sustainability. So before I introduce Mauricio, I want to thank him for accepting our invitation and for being here. And I want to brag on him a little bit for letting me drag him around with a lot of extra activities in addition to this talk that really help us raise the visibility of the Center for Latin American Studies, promote show the relevance of Latin American studies, and promote the value of language studies. So I can't remember the days, but anyways, we went to PK Young High School to an entrepreneurship class. Then we went to a newly established club, Spanish for Construction, over in Rinker. And then we did a Mesa de Español to go interact with students there. And then, and MDP and MALA students he met with yesterday to talk a little bit about careers. And tomorrow we're doing some recordings of videos just to also to talk about the value of language, culture in the workplace, which is motivate students to get more involved with us. So I appreciate you doing all these extra activities. And we have we have a fourth Bacardi speaker coming March 28th. Are they at 4? They're at 4, right? Downstairs. So this professor is coming from Puerto Rico, Teresa Longobardi, but I don't remember her title right now, but we'll be sending out information. So the reason we're here, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mauricio, and then he can come up and start with his talk. Mauricio Chavarria Osorio is the Regional Director for Latin America at the Global Environment and Technology Foundation, where he designs and leads high-impact water security programs across the region. With over 20 years of experience at the intersection of the private sector and social impact, Mauricio has worked with multinational corporations to develop regional and global sustainability partnerships that drive meaningful change. His expertise lies in mobilizing resources for clean water access in high-need communities and protecting critical watersheds across the region. He currently leads 2 of Latin America's most ambitious water security initiatives. As part of his collaboration with GETF, the Global Environment Technology Foundation, Mauricio spearheaded the creation of Aliados por el Agua, a flagship water access and hygiene initiative for Coca-Cola Latin America, supported by the Coca-Cola Foundation. This program aims to provide clean water and hygiene solutions to 2 million people by 2030 through inclusive and collective action. He oversees a portfolio of high-impact projects across 19 Latin American countries, ensuring that the best local and regional expertise is leveraged for maximum community benefit. He holds an MBA and has completed executive training in global management, public relations, and social impact design. He's fluent in Spanish and English. So please join me in welcoming Mauricio. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be invited at this university and the Center for Latin American Studies. I am Salvadoran. As you may know, I have an MBA, but I also did a pre-grad degree in economics. So that's how I started. But I never worked in economics. I decided to go into marketing, sales, experts, real estate, government, and then finally I arrived into communications, public affairs, and sustainability. And since then, I've been working in sustainability in the corporate sector. I started working for an organization called SAB Miller, South African Breweries. It was a company that had operations mostly in Africa, but then it expanded to East Europe and then Latin America. And it became the second largest brewery in the world after it was purchased by Anheuser-Busch. But I learned a lot from sustainability with them. And then I moved to the US and I started working with Coca-Cola in Atlanta, where I was part of the public affairs, sustainability, and communications team, managing all the partnerships related to environmental programs, water, recycling, sustainable agriculture, and human rights in the procurement area. Since then I moved to Washington, D.C. and started my own consultancy, and I started working with GETF, it's easier to say as the name, and I started managing the communications of a really big program that this organization put together along with Coca-Cola in Africa. It was called the Replenish Africa Initiative, and it had the goal of providing safer water access for almost 8 million people in Africa in 41 countries, working with everyone who wanted to partner them. That program was so successful that I decided to import it to Latin America. So what I'm going to be sharing today is something that we learned in Africa, in the Global South, and we brought it to the Global South in Latin America. And now it's serving as an example for Coca-Cola in the North, which is something that I'm really proud of. But a little bit of context. So, and pretty much you work in sustainability, some of you. So I'm going to share something for the ones who are not working in sustainability. Where is the water in our planet? And this graphic, when I saw it the first time, it surprised me. Less than 1% of the water in the planet is fresh water available for us. All the rest is in places that we cannot access it so easily. Wow, that's fantastic to know it. And then from the 1.5%, this is the way where we see it. That's lakes, rivers, and watersheds underground, just to name some. The consumption of human beings is rising every single day, and we are about to meet the balance, and we're going to start consuming more water than what's available in easily accessed places. And then how do we use it in the planet? And again, some surprising figures, almost 90% of the water is used for agricultural purposes. And then only 10% is for human consumption and businesses. So I'm going to be concentrated on that 8% and what the businesses are doing to try to be neutral in their own, knowing that they are not the ones exactly that are consuming the majority of the water, but they are pushing to the agriculture sector to be more involved. And I'm going to provide a few examples of our work. A little bit of statistics about the water crisis that the world is suffering. 1 in 4 people worldwide is in areas with water stress. And that means that people, they don't have access to water every day, not the 20 liters that the United Nations says that we all need daily per person, or the ones who have it, they don't have it in good quality. I come from a country that many years ago, I remembered I opened the faucet and the water was completely white because they had put too much chlorine in it. And in some towns that I visited while doing some social work, the water was brown or green. So that's part of what a lot of people are suffering around the world. And then we have some other problems like climate change, overuse, and pollution. It was very sad 2 years ago to be able to witness how a large chemical pollution happened in one of the tributaries of the Amazon, produced by heavy rains that made overflows coming from a mining company. And it destroyed the river, it killed all the species that were living there, and it contaminated several communities. That's happening all the time in all countries. Second, climate change. We are suffering in Latin America. In what we see are large droughts. We are seeing a lot of floodings. It rains a lot in very short periods of time. And that's happening more and more. And then the seasons for us, we are perceiving that the seasons have moved and they go back and forward in the month that it was supposed to rain. Third, businesses are water users, only 8%, but they are very committed in trying to be neutral with the water that they are using. And the way they are working is through public and private partnerships. And that's what we do as GETF. We're expert in promoting water partnerships to be neutral, to help communities and try to mitigate the effects of climate change, and also help communities to become resilient. And this is the program that we imported from Africa. It's called Aliados por el Agua. Allies for Water, and in a few countries is Unidos por el Agua because of trademark registers. This program departs from a global commitment, and this is Coca-Cola's a global commitment and the priority of water for their businesses. Without water, they cannot have businesses. And then that's why they consider it a priority and essential because it's part of the products that they sell, but it's also needed in the communities. They have three priorities that lead the water commitments. One is to be super efficient internally in the operations where they operate. And they are trying to all the time improve how many water they use to clean the bottles, to clean the facilities, to clean the machines, and put it in the product. And right now they have reduced the amount of water in the ratio that they are reporting. Nowadays, it's 2.8 liters of water per 1 liter of Coca-Cola, just to say one brand. So they started, when I started working with them, they started with almost 4 liters. And they have reduced it to 2.1, and they have the ambition to go lower than that. The second one is healthy watersheds. So they know that in order to have business for the next 200 years, they need watersheds that are not getting dry. Whenever they do an investment of $500 million in a bottling facility, they are not doing it for the next 10 years, not the next 50 years. They need to be sure that that watershed is going to be available, healthy, recharging for the next 200 years. So they are doing a lot of work in protecting watersheds right now. And finally, people. They also know that communities that do not have access to water cannot accept a business that is extracting a lot of water and distributing it. So Aliados por el Agua is a multi-sector collaboration platform that was created by GETF, and then we have a second organization called Global Water Challenge, GWC, and many other partners. It's active in 19 countries, and in large, we promote projects around watershed protection, community water access facilitation, and strengthening local water governance. How Aliados offsets Coca-Cola water consumption. So what we do is we design projects tailored to the context of the watershed or the communities. And then we establish how much water Coca-Cola wants to compensate. They don't use that word. They use the word replenish. So once they know that they need to replenish, let's say 1 million megaliters a year, we start looking for implementing partners that can produce a project, that can put together a proposal in order to compensate that amount of water. And the way that we do it is through nature-based solutions, through water leak detections in cities in order to reduce water loss. That's called non-revenue water. And for Latin America, that's super important. Almost half of the water that we pump out of the ground in Latin America is lost through leaks. We recently, last Tuesday to be specifically, repaired a big leak that it was equivalent to 200 Olympic pools per year. So we did a big major repair in Monterrey, working with the water operator, and that compensates part of the water that they are using in Monterrey in one of the facilities that Coca-Cola has there. We also do a lot of agriculture improvement in irrigation. We are working with farmers across Mexico, across Brazil, some in Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile. So they learn how to use less water to irrigate all what they are producing, mostly corn, sugar, and a lot of fruits. Also in Argentina, like oranges and lemons. I have a few pictures because sometimes it's difficult for me to show the work that we do. And these are infiltration trenches that we construct and we build in order to reduce the erosion. So we capture rainwater and we make it infiltrate over time. And this is a project that we did in Tlaxcala, Mexico. There are some other solutions like stone dams that reduce also erosion, and we have done multiple of them. This one particularly is in Jose Luis Alvarado, but we are also doing a lot of these in Baja California Sur in Mexico. So whenever we have these big storms, what happens is that it washes down the mountains and it ends in the sea. So we're trying to stop the water in order to be infiltrated over there and to be there for the farmers, for the families, for the communities. Another sample of projects, these are contour edges that we do with tractors in order to reduce also the velocity of the water. And we have also restored ancient technology that we found in Peru. The Incas had already found that in the bottom of the mountain, they could do a big trench and conduct water through some channels, and they used it to irrigate fields. What happened with time after 500 years is that all those channels were completely with a lot of soil. So the water was not running anymore. So one of the projects that we did in those amunas, that's the name in the Incas language of those channels. And we started restoring that by cleaning them and also doing some repairs in them with stone, the original stone that was in the region. So now those channels are starting to work again as the Incas developed it probably 1,000 years ago. Okay, so a few extra slides. The United Nations created an office to work with the private sector. It is called the CEO Water Forum. It has two big programs. One is the World's Resilience Coalition, and it promotes projects to restore watershed health. And they published 2 years ago a list of 100 key water basins around the world that we all needed to be aware of and start collective action. You can see here in America, not only Latin America, these are the key watersheds that they are inviting companies and everyone to protect. So through the projects that we put together in Aliados, we have done all these projects in the pink dots for community access projects, and also in green dots, the conservation ones. We are working in every watershed that they invited us to contribute and more in Latin America through Aliados. Just one pause, we are also working another big platform for Cargill Currents. Cargill Currents is a big intermediary of agricultural goods. They say that in our countries, we can find products that move through their system. 75% of what we have in our countries was moved through Cargill's value chain, which is, wow, it's a lot. So they are also doing a lot of work in Brazil with us, and they have another project called Cargill Currents, through which we are facilitating water access for communities where they are sourcing from. Results, just to make a summary, Coca-Cola is also counting the number of people that they are touching. This is the number at November last year. 1.1 million people got water access through Aliados projects in the last 4 years. I have a new number now. When we added a new quarter with the final reports that we got from all the implementing partners, that rose to 1.3 million people. That's a lot. We are more than half the ambition of this program. They set an ambition for 2 million people for 2030. We're going to make it to 3 or 4 million as the pace that we are developing. The other thing is that 88 watersheds have different projects, and we are working in a lot of sites in Latin America. And for Coca-Cola internally, what they want to do is replenish 100% of the water that they are using in their products, and they are overpassing that. Okay, I'm going to stop here just to answer any of your questions. Please.
Thank you so much for that
Beth,
talk.
is
That
it?
was super interesting and kind of inspiring in many ways to try to find some solutions to the problems with water. My question is, how do you decide where to work? For example, the conservation projects, how are those decisions made? Because I'm sure that there's a whole, suite of communities and so forth that would love to have the project based in their locality. So how are those decisions?
That's very easy for Coca-Cola because they know exactly the coordinates of each of the bottling facilities. They have 66 bottling facilities that are, they call it leadership locations, the most important ones in Latin America. So what we look is the minor basin. So exactly what's the basin underneath the bottling facilities. So we do a lot of call for proposals for implementing partners that we know that they operate over there, or open calls, also inviting anyone who can propose any project. And then what we do is we do an estimation of what the proposal can even give in terms of volumetric value. And I need to make a pause on that. The Water Resource Institute, WRI.org, if you want to take a look, they published a methodology to do that mathematics. It's the volumetric water balance accounting. So there's a lot of science behind it. We are not the scientists. We are just like the executors of the projects. But we know how the mathematics work. So when we get a project proposal of someone trying to do better irrigation in some places in Mexico versus another proposal that is trying to restore the watershed in the higher area by just doing reforestation, we can compare which of those is going to give more volumetric value and then at a reasonable price for what the investment is going to be. Sometimes we contract both. Sometimes it's not enough one solution because the watersheds have different levels. So what we have found, just to give you an example, in Toluca, Mexico, Driscolls. I don't know if you have Driscolls here in the supermarket, the strawberries. So they are produced in Mexico in that area. So, and we buy it in our house. And what happened is that they started to grow their production because they were exporting a lot to the US. And they started just like removing forest in that part of the basin. So what happens after that is that they had more erosion. So we had less capture of water in the whole water basin. So we started working with them to help them get new technology to irrigate and develop some barriers in order to keep the soil in place and not go to the rivers that are downstreams. So that's some examples of work we're doing, and it's very context-based. So when we take a look of the minor basins, we do an assessment of what are the challenges for the water basin. Sometimes it's pollution, because there are some factories over there. So we need to work with the factories and municipalities in order to do some push on requirements that they need to have water treatment for the effluents that they have and everything. Sometimes it's easier because it's a watershed that it needs only protections from fires. We have seen a lot of fires, not only here in California, but we have similar fires happening in the Amazonian. I think you remember, like 5 years ago, there were big fires in Brazil, a lot of protests in DC, I remember, because the government was not doing enough in order to stop them. So we have projects that what they are doing is monitoring through satellites fires in an early stage and training and having squads in the region ready to go and extinguish them before they get bigger. Oh, by doing that, you can quantify volumetric values. It's fascinating. That's another type of solutions that we have. And in just another examples in Argentina, there is an organization that is working a project in 5 natural protected areas. They have been appointed to manage them, and they have like 7 type of solutions. They have fire brigades, restoration, promotion of invasive species. I didn't know about those before coming to work with the Replenish Africa initiative. When an invasive species reaches one watershed, it starts depleting a lot of water. So if you remove them, water appears again. And that's fascinating, but you need to keep on doing that. So it's a very expensive project, but in Argentina, they're doing it. And it's very efficient. And also improving the agriculture irrigation. That's very valuable. So thank you for the question, yes.
Yeah, I have a few questions, but I'll start with the first one is that you talked about, like projecting out 50 years. And, I'm just thinking of the uncertainty, related to climate change. how that's affecting rainfall patterns and climatic patterns and so forth. And, you know, in like some areas, they model that there could be an increase in precipitation, and others, you know, there would be more droughts and so forth. I'm wondering if you use those models when you decide where you put your efforts. Do you do you focus on areas where the expectation is that there might actually be an increase in precipitation, or you also go into areas where models indicate that within much less than 50 years, there will be great reductions in precipitation?
We are using it, and also Coca-Cola uses them a lot to decide where they can continue operating. In my country, in El Salvador, many years ago, they decided to move a facility that they had worked for about 50 years. So it was in a very early stage. The machines were in good condition, but they had to move it because the watershed was under a big stress, not because of them, but because of the development of the city. So it was in the middle of the city. So we both have those projections. And the way we use it in some occasions is to try to establish the potential benefit of the projects, but also the stress of the watershed in the future. And we know, and we are seeing that more and more in Latin America, populations are growing. So they are demanding more housing. And we are helping some communities. Just to give an example, in Bolivia, there are 5 organizations that are working for a program called Bolivia con Agua. It's a movement that they created, Habitat for Humanity, food for the hungry, water for the people. In 3 or 4 more local organizations, they decided to join efforts and to start working with municipalities to expand water coverage. And we're doing that, and that has also volumetric value. So we can count it for replenishment for Coca-Cola. But when we do that, we're extracting more water from the watershed. So you also need to take care of that by doing some reforestation. In short, those models and projections for the future help Coca-Cola to decide where to operate. For us to decide the projects, what we take in account, and we evaluate what type of projects we need to do based on that. Sometimes when rain's not going to happen, like in Maipo, Chile. In Maipo, Chile, rain has been very, very low in the past 20 years. But they have big wine grapes fields, and they are continue growing. They have cattle practices over there. They have a lot of businesses happening. So knowing that there's going to be less rain every year, or it's going to be very low, what can we do? And we started doing an assessment 6 months ago with Fundación Chile over there, trying to do those projections. And at the very end, we're not going to be doing nature-based solutions, or we're not going to be doing reforestation, because if I plant a tree, I need to irrigate it, and I don't have water to do it. So I need to do something else. So we decided that we're going to be working with improving in irrigation with agriculture, and big companies are operating there, so they understand that. We are going to start working in water leak detection programs across the cities, because we need to also reduce the amount of water that is pumped by cities. So the watershed, it's allowed to recharge in a better pace. So we use those models to make some decisions on what type of projects run in different countries. In some other areas, those models are fantastic, because in the Amazonian, in Bolivia or in Peru, there are some areas that eat water a lot. The problem is how to handle that water in a short period of time. So we're creating these big artificial reservoirs in order to capture that water and to prevent flooding. I remember Annabelle, my wife, she participated in a project in El Salvador creating exactly that. Big laminated pools that lower the pace of the water, so that it does not destroy cities that are down the stream of rivers. So that works also. So in Mexico, we have created, they call them ollas. What would be the translation to ollas? It's like a kitchen pan. So it's a big pan on the soil that like stadium size, in order to capture rainwater and to keep it for further irrigation purposes mostly. I hope I've responded your question. That's a very complex thing, yes. Anyone else,
Yes.
please?
Thank you. It's very inspiring to see Coca-Cola focusing on water and compensation for its use, et cetera. And I understand that you work for a separate company.
Yes.
Or organization. So I'm questioning, or I'd like a little bit more information about, is Coca-Cola basically funding this and completely, or are there others? And I also really would like to dig into your title of public-private partnerships, because I think it's amazing how you're working with communities and local organizations, and you're private. What about the public sector?
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's very important. So I can give you some statistics. A Coca-Cola, yes, they invest a lot. In the past years, they have invested something close to $6 million in the water facilitation projects. But on top of that, municipalities and other private parties have invested twice that amount. So Coca-Cola is investing 1/3, more or less, of that, because most of the investment comes from the public sector, not the private sector. And Coca-Cola does not want to be the one only participating. That's a coalition that's promoting this partnership. So it's not present in our presentation, but now we as an organization are promoting between private companies to start collaborating. So we just had meetings with Heineken and Coca-Cola to start developing projects in Namibia, just to give you an example. In Brazil, we have been partnering with Heineken and Coca-Cola to do similar work in one watershed. Even if the project is not one, but at least it's coordinated between the two companies. And in Mexico, there are 3 PPPs that are working like as a good example of multiple companies involved in what? In one is called Aguas Firmes, which is Anheuser-Busch, AB InBev, Coca-Cola, and the GIC, the corporation from Germany. They developed a project that started 5 years ago. Now it closed the first stage, and Coca-Cola decided to join, and now we are leading a component of that project that it's trying to protect 3 watersheds in Mexico by working collectively. And that takes into account also communities, indigenous communities, and municipalities. We all the time consider municipalities. Probably I should mention those more because they are critical, because when we develop any type of infrastructure, we give it to them and we train them on how to use it. And sometimes, like in Brazil, we're doing now a project that we are helping them to strengthen their capabilities on how to do invoicing for the communities. So because communities are operating their own water systems, but they need to charge their neighbors. So this is your bill, you need to pay, because if not, we're not going to have water in the whole community. Or improving infrastructure, installing solar panels, improving better pumping equipment, and also chlorination. There was one community in Fortaleza, Brazil, that I visited, and we get very early in the morning to the big water station that they had. And they had appointed one of the neighbors to have the chlorine tablets. And he went 7 o'clock in the morning and he deposited the tablet. And he went in the afternoon and he deposited the second one. So we're changing all that with a machine that was developed in Brazil that makes chlorine out of with electrolysis through salt and water. It creates chlorine, and it's automatic to the tank. So we're replacing the potential error of that person not putting enough or more, or not being present one day because he's sick. Just to give you another example. So governments are very important, but the type of projects that we lead are what are called last mile, where the government, the central government, is not present there. So we're working with municipalities, and when municipalities are broken or they don't have resources, we work with communities to organize them themselves to operate these systems. ¿Alguien más?
I guess the big question is, I'm sure that some of this funding for some of your partners, and we discussed this a little bit the other night, still from USAID.
Yes.
And, you know, a lot of the bilateral aid agencies, I saw Holland, you know, they're going to go down some kind of similar path that the US is going now. And so it seems like there's a lot of, you know, weakness in the overall system of development and cooperation. How is that going to potentially impact your work? And is there enough like firepower in the, combination of private companies, businesses like yours that I know depends on grants and so forth to keep this going?
In the case of Aliados and the other platforms that we are operating with the private sector, they are continuing and they are investing more because the private sector sometimes they have like a double commitment with these type of things happen. This happened in the previous period with the current president. So by that time I was working with Coca-Cola and the response, I attended one of the COPs, the conference of the parties, and the response was the private sector from the US is going to continue doing development. It's going to continue investing. So in the case of my projects in Latin America, the funding has expanded this year because they knew this was going to happen. And now, in response of the projects, yes, we had projects that had funds from USAID, and they were impacted, mostly in Africa. So we have teams that they were just like put away until we find new sources of funding. But what we are seeing also is that the private philanthropic movement and organizations, they are also responding more. And we are just in several conversations with them in order to cover those holes that created USAID in this moment, because it's a moment of transition. We are expecting that they are going to be doing something with the Department of State and create some new guidelines on foreign cooperation, hopefully. So we'll see. But what we're seeing in the region is that the private sector is covering for it. And also, we have seen that there are conversations between the multilaterals also. So in Latin America, the Latin American Bank for Development, the CAF, they have expanded investments in the region. They are very active right now. The World Bank also, IDB is also investing more. So we are about to launch a project with IDB in Brazil to promote exchange of knowledge between water operators here in the US and Brazilian water operators. Just by promoting those exchanges, technical exchanges, we have seen that it has tremendous value for the way they operate, and they serve big populations like in Sao Paulo in Brazil. But with that said, we had a project in Ecuador that was a matching fund from Coca-Cola from a big project of USAID through RTI called Tumuni. It's like your municipality. That's the translation. Your muni. That will be the translation. That was an investment of, I don't know, $18 million to support water operators across Ecuador. And they were in the diagnostic phase, and they were about to start designing projects. That's when Coca-Cola decided to partner them. We hired RTI. We launched the project 3 weeks ago. And last week, RTI told us that their team was completely dismantled. So we don't have anyone to do the project anymore in Ecuador. We need to find one. So we're not going to stop. We just need to find another implementing partner. But that's sad because we already wasted many months of work, sorry.
I would just comment.
Please.
I would just comment that in Brazil, they have these water basin committees, a public policy to create a space for multi-stakeholder management of watersheds. It's not very operational, except in a few exemplary cases, but that would be a wonderful avenue for bringing in both technical expertise and also just thinking about watershed management.
Totally. And these two projects I mentioned in Mexico, Aguas Firmes, and the other one I didn't mention, the name is Charco Bendito. Charco Bendito is like holy puddle. Yeah, holy puddle. Yeah. That's another partnership between 12 private companies, mostly in the beverage industry. Diageo, Pernod Ricard, all the alcoholic business are there, plus Pepsi, Nestle, Coca-Cola, and Danone. They are working all together to protect the watershed in Jalisco, which is fantastic. And they are not fighting each other, even if they are competitors, but they are not fighting there. And their projects, that one in Aguas Firmes, the other one that I mentioned before, it has a big component coming from the GIC to improve the governance of those councils that are managing the watershed, because they work in paper, but in real life, no one dedicates a lot of time to make them happen. Coca-Cola did sponsor in the past, like 20 years ago, water funds in Latin America. In what it was, it's a financial vehicle that needs these governance councils for the watershed. And those work perfectly or very well, I'm gonna say it, in multiple places, like in Ecuador, Quito, there was a waterfront called FONAG. That's still working, and it did good work and created good governance for that. In Brazil, there were 3 water funds, one more in Colombia. But it's still very limited. But you're right, there is a tremendous opportunity to strengthen those capacities and to make them functional. Okay, great, thank you. Someone here? No? Well, if not, thank you so much for the opportunity. This is a very fulfilling just to be able to share this among people who treasure what we're doing. There you go.